Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you this morning, Dr. Paul.
A new week.
A new week.
Anything else new?
Yeah. Well, we should tell our viewers we've had some problems with our equipment over the last few weeks, and we've had some challenges. But the good news is that we're in the process of making a lot of changes that we should have made probably a few years ago. But neither of us like change very much, and so this has kind of forced our hand. So our viewers, you will see some changes in the next few days as we replace equipment, as we get a new set that's actually a live set, and hopefully things will go much more smoothly. So we want to welcome everyone back. We've been away for a while, Dr. Paul, but now we're back and bringing the news.
That's good. And what's the date today?
Insurrection Day.
January 6th. There wasn't. No. It's the insurrection that wasn't. Thomas Buckley from the Mises Institute did a neat article on this subject.
Yeah.
It was in Zero Hedge. And one of the leading comments got our attention. It's typically, coup attempts do not wrap up in time for dinner. That raises a question. Was there really a coup?
Yeah.
I claim philosophically there was a coup in the 1960s with assassinations and all that went on then. And that was certainly much closer to living up to the definition of a coup than this has. But this has been worked over so much, and I think, after the election, I said, well, they're the jury. They're the jury, they're ruling, and they're saying, we don't believe all the lies, but they're not giving up. You still hear it on the TV. And even recently, they're still trying to arrest people on this.
Yeah.
I mean, how long can they do this? And I think they live live with their lies. I think they convince themselves they're lying, and they don't blink an eye.
Yeah.
So, but I think the people finally caught on to what was going on, and this is good. And yet, just recently, they're still. It isn't like they're walking away and hang their head down and say, well, this quit it, we're beating up too much. Let's arrest more people. We have 2 days left,
Yeah.
And well, that to me is rather sad. And of course, legally, the most important thing that people woke up to was the fact that they were making all these wild charges, and there was a coup and taking over the United States government, insurrection, on and on. But they never got charged with any of that. So the people charged, some of them, I imagine there's some still in prison over this, And so as far as the rule of law goes, there hasn't been. I think long term it's going to get sadder because how long this lasted and how the media rolled over to produce all this for the last several years. Of course, they started probably 8 years ago. But anyway, I think the truth wins out in the end, and I think that right now we're analyzing it to the point that a lot of lies have been told, and I think the American people have awakened to the point where they're more cautious. One thing that I'm hoping is that they're more critical and willing to look at these secret organizations like the CIA and the FBI. And, with the recent shenanigans going on now and violence, we saw an announcement the other day, well, we're sending in 300 FBI agents to check this out and find out who did what when. And my first thought, of course, just a thought because it wouldn't reflect that I have any proof, my thought was, I wonder if they're covering in to find the truth or cover up. Yeah. And they do a lot of covering up, and I guess in time we'll find out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's put on that first clip because this is from the Mises Institute, our friends over at Mises, the January 6th insurrection that wasn't. And the thing is, even just today, Dr. Paul, we laugh about using this as an insurrection. As you point out, typically coup attempts do not wrap up in time for dinner, as Buckley writes in Mises. But if we transport ourselves back 4 years when it happened, and you remember what it was like after January 6th, the media was in a frenzy. They were all on the same page. And it was also in the depths of COVID tyranny. So we had already experienced at least a year or around a year of censorship, of telling people you can't talk about this virus in any way other than the way we tell you to. And so we sort of had been conditioned at that time to be careful and worried. And so when we looked at what happened, I think you had a column that came out just right afterward or something, where you said, this doesn't look like an insurrection to me. But at that time, just saying that, people kind of forget that, but just saying that was so radical. And in fact, we lost one of our board members. He wrote to me and said, I don't want to be affiliated with the Ron Paul Institute at all if you don't think this was a coup. Well, fortunately, history has kind of come on our side of things. But at the time, there was a palpable fear in the country that this was some sort of an insurrection. It turns out it was all a narrative, a psyop.
Yes, and I'm amazed at how long it goes. Yes, people are waking up, and it sort of mimics the same type of lying and nonsense about COVID. Look how long that took to listen to the lies of years, and how many people have suffered there. How many people died, with COVID,
Yeah.
and the mischief they imposed on us. So, but it's a shame, and I keep emphasizing the tragedies of war. We should spend a lot more time preventing wars than trying to get out of wars, because we never get out of them. We get into these messes mainly because the government's out of control, and they get into it, and then it's very difficult to get out. And then people get very confused. It's an argument on who's telling the truth. And eventually it seems like truth does win out, but it's painful and it takes a long time. And then the amount of control of the propaganda is overwhelming. So I can see why people, listen to that and say they can't. They've been conditioned not to reject it immediately. Yeah. And I'm even wondering, when I want to talk about something, I say I better be careful, because how are they going to interpret this? And will this help us in presenting the truth or not? So it is a job to get the information out.
Yeah, and you even mentioned how many died during COVID. They're still pushing the lie that police officers were killed on January 6th. I think it was Mayorkas himself, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I could be corrected, but I did see a statement on X earlier making reference to 5 law enforcement officers who died, which is not true, because the implication is that they were killed by the insurrectionists, when in fact the only person who was killed was an unarmed U.S. veteran who was shot at close range. And there's a great article, by the way, up on the Ron Paul Institute website about this. But I think 4 of those 5 officers that they said were killed actually killed themselves, which is very odd. 4 suicides, and 1 had a stroke and died from the stroke. So no one was attacked. But they still keep that lie up. And the other thing that we don't know and we need to know is how many of the more radical and violent protesters or insurrectionists were actually FBI agents or informants. I know Massey's tried to get to the bottom of this. Other members of Congress have tried to ask and get to the bottom of this. But we don't know. Yes, there was some violence, but what if the most violent people were actually the FBI people trying to get everyone else to get on board?
And that's the whole thing. I want them to find out more about this. I mean, we've learned a lot since it's happened in the last couple of years. But if we should find out who's really the guilty parties. And it looks like if we could magically pick them out and say, this handful is guilty and this one here, misdemeanor, this, and punish those who really committed the most violent and vicious crimes and crimes against the Constitution and all. And unfortunately for our country, it's probably the people who are supposed to protect us, the FBI, and we certainly know of the shortcomings of the CIA. We know the shortcomings of the Pentagon and our wars and all the nonsense that goes on in Washington. But I work on the assumption that more people will open their eyes, hopefully, because they're running out of wealth and running out of money, and yet they're desperate to keep the control going. And they believe now all they have to do is create chaos, and they can then impose on us. And there's some truth to that. The more chaos, the more people are likely to say. The government, they've been conditioned for so long to assume the government will always take care of us and not think about the big picture.
Well, you know, one of the things when you want to look at a crime or anything that's happened, you ask who benefits, you know, cui bono. That's what you always ask. So you ask, who benefited from what happened on January 6th? Well, it certainly wasn't Trump. It wasn't the Republicans at all. It wasn't people who thought the election was not very fair. In fact, what it did achieve, this idea, this false narrative that it was an insurrection, it had the very, very beneficial purpose of forcing people to not talk about the elections. Remember at the time, if you did kind of say, hey, this election was a little screwy, something was weird about it, oh, you're an insurrectionist, don't you dare bring it up. So cui bono, who benefited? Well, Biden and the Democratic Party benefited because no one felt comfortable questioning the election because we didn't want to be seen as conspiracy theorists after all.
You know, the people promoted these lies, they got a little bit too cocky because they thought they could continue to do it and say anything. And yet Trump, luck or wisdom or savvy or whatever, everything they did to him did the opposite.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it turned to the point, and you have to give. You know, we complain that the American people don't wake up soon enough, but in this sense, the people did wake up, and they didn't listen to the lies because the major media, you know, was pounding them away with those lies too. So there was a struggle there to survive with who's telling the truth. But they were so cocky that, you know, well, yeah, we'll impeach him and we'll charge him for a crime, and he's going to be a felon and all this. And every time they did it, Trump's support went up. What they didn't recognize, the opposition, is that the American people sensed it was their conclusion, in spite of all the messy stuff they were hearing, came down on the side of saying, you know, they decided which side was lying, you know,
Yeah.
and that has something to do with the you know, outcome of the election.
The thing is, coups are messy business. They're bloody, they're violent usually. And we saw this, we've talked about it so many times, the coup against the elected government in Ukraine. How many people were killed? How much violence? I mean, anyone who's seen a coup or been in a coup or been involved in a coup would recognize that what happened on the 6th of January didn't look anything like a coup. And in fact, Buckley, if you put up that second clip, in his article from the Mises Institute, he points this out, and it seems pretty tame right now, but he writes, a coup is an extremely tricky proposition, as Burt Lancaster's character in the 1964 film 7 Days in May discovered, much to his chagrin. The film and book note the level of detailed planning necessary, the prior co-option of various levers of power that needs to occur, the cruciality for speed of implementation, and just as importantly, the requirement of a post-coup strategy. Buckley continues, January 6th had none of that. The intentional political censorship and elite scheming of the past few years, and of course the bye-bye to Biden, and had all of that, except for his vicious, vengeful installation of Kamala Harris. And this is the important part. If a proper insurrection or coup, in a proper insurrection or coup, one of the key elements is to control the media. If January 6th were a legitimate attempt to overthrow the government, the planners, in theory, would have made sure that only the evil Fox News was left on the air, et cetera, et cetera. So you see what happens when you have a coup that doesn't work well, or when it's not a coup. And you saw that attempt in South Korea recently with the president, and when he declared martial law, and the legislature got together and said, no, we're not going to do this, and they in fact arrested him.
But there was a lot of media still spilling out the lies. The people weren't buying, but they did not understand how much information was being shared on the internet, and that was an unknown probably. And we find out that there was a lot of people were getting it from there rather than the major networks. So that's softened that a bit, but that didn't stop them because they did not have the control of that, and there still was a way for the people to hear the truth.
Yeah, and after they had the fake narrative, then they shut everyone up talking about the election, and then they did, remember, the January 6th committee, where they wouldn't let the Republicans name the people they wanted on the committee. They put Liz Cheney on there instead. Looks like she may have tampered with witnesses. She may actually find herself, she got a little award from Biden, she may actually have to wear it behind bars because it looks like she did some nasty stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, she's probably thought she was made, boy, I came out of a Freedom Award, and boy, I'm a pretty big shot now.
Maybe she needs a pardon.
But I don't, for some reason, I don't think I'm going to hold my breath until we see her in prison. They'll call Dick Cheney back.
And you made one reference to this earlier. They are still hunting people down. Now go to the next one. This is Kyle Cheney, I think he's a conservative commentator. He put out a post yesterday, actually. I think this is shocking. New, the Justice Department revealed it's considering charges in about 200 more cases stemming from the January 6th attack on the Capitol, including 60 felony cases. That's in addition to the 1,583 already charged per brand new Department of Justice stats. Almost 1,600 people already arrested. They're still hunting people down.
And, you know, the administration is going to change. A lot of things are going to change. But when they do this late, and they don't look at the record of how their goals have been complete failure.
Yeah.
You know, the more they do it, the worse it gets. So I think they're really, when they do stuff like that, they're removed from reality. They're just not. They're not understanding anything at all. But fortunately. And I think always the replacement, it'd be nice to say that we had perfect evil we could attack, and that's how we're going to get rid of it. And now we have a perfect alternative to it, because mankind is not quite like that. There's a lot of imperfections out there. So I always want to caution, you know, the replacements and what we substitute for the evil, that we don't fall into any other trap and doing the same thing in a different fashion. It's hard to get rid of the dependency on government. It's a sort of, that is an addiction, and people, it's hard to give it up. Absolutely.
Well, speaking of addiction and government, the second piece we want to cover is something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's something that should concern every American. Now go to that next clip. Now this is a Politico article that is written about a Quincy Institute study, which I'll have the cover of that as a clip later. But here's the title of this Politico piece: Dark Money is Tainting Washington Think Tanks. A new report shows it's worse than you think. Now go to the next one. Here is from that Politico write-up. Washington's think tank industry, and I highlighted this part, which sets the terms of debate for so much of American policymaking, is floating on a sea of foreign government and Pentagon contractor dollars. Now that's the conclusion of this new report from the Quincy Institute. Now go to the next one. Among other things, the paper says the top 50 think tanks in D.C., I think, took in some $110 million over the past 5 years from foreign governments and related entities. This is a serious issue.
It must have been a shock for you to find out that the company that got the most. You've heard of this Rand company?
Yeah.
They were the top receivers.
Yeah.
Because it isn't just people donating and hiding, their propaganda. They get taxpayers' money. This is all stolen money.
Yeah.
And boy.
And you wonder, so why do we have the warfare welfare state? Emphasis on warfare. Because foreign governments that seek to benefit from our military prowess, from our finances, they will pay a think tank, and that think tank will come up with a policy paper saying, we've got to take on the Chinese. We're in danger. You find out who funded it. Now this is, I don't know if this is in the report, but the government of Taiwan, the government of what have you. So this is a huge problem because, and people I don't think realize this, the think tank, and actually our good friend Ray McGovern adds that to his military, industrial, congressional, I forget the rest of it, but the other part of it is think tank complex. And that's absolutely correct, because these are the people who, they go in and out of government. You're an assistant secretary of state, then you go to the American Enterprise Institute when your party's out of power, and then you go back in. It's a revolving door between government, and when they're out of government, they make policy. They make policy papers. They appear before Congress. You remember during the Iraq War, we kept seeing the Kagans, Fred Kagan, from his think tank, always coming before Congress. The surge is working beautifully. We're about to win in Afghanistan, you know. And this is what they do. They have enormous power.
You know, there's two places that they prevent the public from knowing exactly what they're doing. We're talking about the Pentagon and all the spending. But what other group is never really audited, and we don't know what's going on? You can't find they do audits on the Pentagon, and the audit is to hide more stuff. The Federal Reserve. You know, the Federal Reserve, you know, philosophically, just the professors there teach the wrong kind of thing. They don't teach Austrian economics. Yeah. So, but the thing of it is, the colleges already are controlled by big money and government. They're not not too many. There's about what six private colleges or something. So they're run by the government, but then they have these professors, and they feed special articles, and it's contrived between the professors that are working on the side and the Federal Reserve to have these dignified paper, because if you can get in onto this thing, you write a paper, you satisfy that, and that's how you get promotion.
Yeah.
And they just feed that stuff to the Federal Reserve to justify their nonsense. You know, whether it's defending interest rates or whatever other mischief they're doing. So I think it's interesting that those are the two things that's hardest to find out what goes on behind the scene. Yeah. You know, when it comes to the militarism and also the financial system.
And that's one of the points that was made in the Quincy report, is that they don't disclose their foreign funders. They don't have to disclose, you know. And we're not in favor of the government saying, let us know everyone who gave you $1. But there is a problem, I think, when a foreign government can come and say, here, think tank, here's a couple of $1 million, wink, wink. We need a paper on why America needs to intervene here or there or wherever. You know,
money comes from foreign governments. Probably we send money to foreign.
Yeah,
we send it to foreign governments, and then our government, you know, they do it legitimately. They just, do it all the time. Pay, you know, the colleges and businesses to do their bidding. So it is a scheme of propaganda, lying and cheating.
Yeah. Ironically, probably the only foreign country that doesn't fund a lot of think tanks is Israel, because they don't need to. All the policy people are already on their side. But I want to put up, skip ahead a little bit to that Quincy Institute headline, if we could just take a look at it, and encourage folks to go over to Quincy and have a look and read the whole study. Big ideas and big money, think tank funding in America. Now go to the next clip, because I did pull a clip out of this that I think is very important. Ben Freeman is the lead on this. In the past 5 years, foreign governments and foreign government-owned entities donated more than $110 million to the top 50 think tanks in the U.S. The most generous donor countries were the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, and Qatar, which contributed $16.7 million, $15.5 million, and $9.1 million to U.S. think tanks, respectively. Now, this is where it's interesting. The Atlantic Council, Brookings Institution, and German Marshall Fund received the most money from foreign governments since 2019, $20.8 million, $17.1 million, $16.1 million, respectively. In the same period, the top 100 defense contractors have contributed more than $34.7 million to the top 50 think tanks. So our foreign policy, this is one of the reasons why it's very difficult to make headway with non-interventionism, Dr. Paul, because the foreign policy has been hijacked by foreign interests, as you point out, probably using our money to propagandize us into having an aggressive neocon foreign policy.
You know, the article also produced a little room for a bit of optimism. And it says, this has contributed to a crisis of public confidence in think tanks.
Yeah.
And less than half, 48% of respondents in a 2022 U.S. public opinion survey, think tankers, in quotes, and public policy experts are valuable to society. To put that in perspective, medical doctors, 82%, scientists and engineers, 79%, and even much maligned lawyers, 60%. They all were more believable, the individuals. What about who was telling the truth? Yeah. Now the individuals who stood firm on the principles of science and decency in COVID, I mean, they're heroic now, and their voices have grown. for two reasons. They were right, and they were also principled, and they didn't back down by threats.
Well, I certainly don't like the idea that the government should be nosing around in institutions. However, I will make a disclosure to our viewers that the Ron Paul Institute does not receive big money from foreign countries. We don't receive millions of dollars from Qatar. I can assure our viewers of that.
Yeah, but I worked hard. I had a good relationship with all those lobbyists in Washington.
Oh, yeah. They were just writing checks left and right. Well, I guess I'll close down. I want to thank everyone for having patience as we have some birth pains, some growing pains at the Institute, but I think it'll all work out well in the end. And it won't work out if you don't come back and join us, though. So we appreciate you. We hope you had a wonderful Christmas or holiday season or whatever you celebrate. We hope you had some nice time off and enjoyed it with family, as both of us did. I could speak for you, I think, Dr. Paul, on that. And we want to welcome you back, and we're happy that you're here, and you hope you'll stick with us.
Very good.
Dr. Paul.
Yes, we're glad to get back almost to a regular schedule, and it's going to get more regular. And I think, we had equipment that was donated to us about 10 years ago by a supporter. And the equipment, we were very, very grateful. And it was very good equipment. But I guess a lot of people would understand a lot of equipment wears out and you get newer and better. So we used it, and then we were having some problems. And that's the reason we've been raising a little bit of money to try to improve it. And this has worked out very well. But the equipment finally wore out where we had to do something. And fortunately, the technology is improving. There's a lot of technology that moves along. And some of the prices went up, but fortunately, some things, in technology, it can actually come down in prices with inflation, and that's interesting too, because as an example, televisions at one time cost a lot of money. Technology lowered it down, but we still had inflation, and that's an economic issue that people should consider. But I think it's exciting to see, after we get this all done, the equipment is going to be improved, and hopefully it makes the people who deliver the news to you and these comments, a couple of us here that sit in this table, it will make us smarter and better looking. But that's a dream that we have. Personal dream, But anyway, we are very pleased because when we look out and see and hear from our supporters, that's what we see. People who, young and energetic, and I've always praised the young who would come to our rallies, and I always qualified it because sometimes I'd look out and maybe half of them weren't that young. And I said, all you have to be is young in spirit, and that's what liberty is all about. Freedom is a young issue. And of course, the founders gave it a tremendous boost, historically speaking. So that is what's so important, that there's a lot of room for improvement. And even though things look bad right now, there's a step in the right direction. Let's just hope we can help that step along and make sure we always move toward freedom and prosperity, which is available to us if we understand and emphasize the importance of personal liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.